Do you know of any studies that are on the horizon or that have come out? Because I don't know if you saw the more recent, I think in the last maybe couple of months, there was another high volume study. I guess it was kind of like the third high volume study that seemed to confirm that these
Yep.
very high volumes are better. But it seems that all of these studies, as far as I'm aware, have incorporated really short rest periods. And I think that's kind of been the big caveat is that they
Yep.
have short rest periods and which seems counterintuitive to me in the sense that why if you're going to get the same results, why are you trying to cram in more sets into the same amount of time and just like resting less? If you can rest longer and do less
Sure.
sets and get similar
The,
results, that just seems to make more sense to me.
the paper you're referring to, the lead researcher was Brigado,
Mm-hmm.
and they basically seem to verify that some ungodly number of sets, I think it was another 45 sets per week, was superior. And though I think the leg was like 1632, it's maybe 48. I think it was 16 3 times a week. They did squat and leg press 8 by 10 rep max on a
Yeah.
60-second rest interval.
Oof.
Prove it. Prove it. Now, when you look at it and read the methods, they are defining failure as form failure. Now, on the squats, depending your form may break long before you hit muscular failure. I mean, honestly, if you're a decently trained lifter, you should be able to get there. But regardless, what this means is that their 10 rep max is probably 3 to 4 reps short of muscular failure. Now, they did this on the leg press.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where form failure on the leg press is supposed to happen. It should be at muscular. Like, I'm not sure what they're going to define. Maybe not. Maybe cutting depth. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what seems to be the case? Chris Beardsley wrote a piece on this, and I sort of put this summary together in my group. Right. If you look at the 3 high volume studies, right, which are the original Brad's paper, the Cody Hahn et al., when the Mike
Yep.
Israetel was involved with, and the new one. If you look at the training, it's extremely inefficient. Brad supposedly did 5 by 8 to 12 rep max in the squat. Again, form failure on 90 seconds, followed by leg press, followed by leg extension. I want to see the videos. I did a little weird little article, right? I want to see the videos of these workouts because if you come to Austin, I will take you through 2 sets of squats to failure and you will not get off the floor. And I did. I issued a challenge last year. I said, someone send me a video of them doing this. Anybody, prove me wrong. People want me to shut up. I said, if you want me to shut up, prove me wrong. Somehow nobody proved me wrong because this is an impossible workout. There is another study. Anyway, so you look at them, right? So the paper Mike Israetel was involved with, they did sets of 10 on a 14 RM. So it's 4 reps in reserve, 4 reps away from failure. Because of the way they circuited there was a 10-minute rest interval between every set. So what they did was warm-up sets for about an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I could do that till I got bored. Right? By the time they were doing 32 sets a week, like, okay, 12 sets of 10 with 4 reps are in reserve with a 10-minute rest interval. Number one, how ungodly boring. But number two, those sets are useless. Those are just a series of warm-up sets as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at Brad's paper, again, this is an extremely inefficient method of training. And I find it really weird. Brad's lab did a paper showing that anything less than 2 minutes was inferior. Why does he keep doing these 60 to 90-second rest interval studies? And I actually asked him when this paper first came out. He said, well, it's to keep the workout shorter for being too long. Well, right there, you've identified the big problem with this nonsense. The workouts become intractable. The Brigado paper did squat followed by leg press, 8 by 10. The high volume group did 8 by 10 RM on 60 seconds. Sure, I believe you.
Did they reduce weight each time
Oh, they
or
had to. I bet they were using the bar by the last set. That's
yeah.
why I want to see the video. Now, there's another group, and I don't think the study has come out yet, who actually put a video up on Instagram of one of their training sessions. Now they did this ugly, like I was really, The first thing they were looking to one degree about differences in muscular endurance women and men, like reps to failure. And one woman did like 80 reps to failure in a partial squat to a box. 80. Okay. But then they put a guy in the leg press and took him to muscular failure, true muscular failure. Yeah. He crawled out of the machine and collapsed. That's a set to failure. You're not getting off the floor in 90 seconds, much less doing 5 of those, unless you're stopping so short of failure or having to reduce the weight by, and again, you can prove this to yourself. Anyone going to the gym, get on a hammer machine, do a set to true muscular failure, where you're pressing as hard as possible till the weight won't move. Wait 60 seconds, see how many reps you get. If you get half as many, I'll be stunned. Or you can cut the weight by half. So you have these 3 studies supporting these enormous volumes. Then you got about 6 showing that moderate volumes are better. Then you got the Barbalo study showing that the lowest volumes were better, right? They found that basically 5 sets to true limits was as good. At 10 sets was as good, and then at 15 and 20, they got worse results. But this is all done in one workout because no human being can do 20 sets to true failure, even with a long rest interval, and have it be. That's just it's an excessive workout. And I think that's what sort of summarizes this. And I wrote about this last year, and then Chris Beardsley did a piece recently trying to sort of synthesize this, right? So the current model, we've got this effective rep theory of training, right? Is that basically it's the repetitions done under maximal activation are the ones that stimulate growth, right? Which is usually the last, 3 to 4 to failure, if you're working to limits, depending on what intensity you start at. So if you do a heavy set of 8 to true failure, you're going to get like 4 effective reps per set, maybe even more. Now, if you do a set to form failure that is 3 reps from true muscular failure, you get 1 effective rep. In the Israetel study, the Cody Hahn paper, again, sets of 10 with a 14 RM, maybe 1 effective rep, maybe 2. I'll be generous. Well, let's add that up. If you do 10 warm-up sets, essentially, with 2 effective reps, you've gotten 20 effective reps that workout. And if you do 5 sets of 5 to failure, you've gotten 25. The end, you can either do 5 real sets or 10 piss-ass sets. You can do 8 medium heavy sets, maybe 1 or 2 reps short of failure, or you can do 16 worthless sets because you're on a freaking 60-second rest interval, and there's no possible way you're anywhere close to failure and that was basically what Chris sort of concluded. Same thing I wrote last year was that basically they're using volume to make up for set effectiveness.
Right. And I do understand your criticisms of it for sure, especially I think if we just look at these studies, obviously when the Brad Schoenfeld came out, that was, that generated a ton of conversation. And then, since then, I guess my question would be not really playing devil's advocate, but more just to hear the other side. I think when you look at these studies and you say, wow, 20, 30 plus sets to failure with 60 seconds rest, it seems kind of silly. And I don't know really anybody who's doing that. Even when James Kiefer did when he did his own experiment, he ended up just doing it for upper body, and he adjusted things down a little bit because of his age. So ultimately, it wasn't really what the study was showing. And I think he might have extended his rest periods, but I'm not sure about that. But regardless, it wasn't exactly what the study said.
Sure.
My question to you would be, I think the people who really do advocate higher volumes, let's say like a Mike Israetel and some others, the argument I think would be, okay, maybe let's say 8 to 10 all-out sets would be probably more in line with what you would recommend versus maybe for him it's, again, obviously there's a huge range and he scales up, let's say on average, 16 to 24 sets, keeping some reps in reserve. Do you think that is as effective, less effective, or do you think it's just unnecessary to even go into all of that it's just kind of wasting time to do so much?
Well, I think I come from that perspective. It's like, you can do 15 sets to what I consider just fooling around, or you could just do 6 to 8 hard sets and get the hell out of the gym.
Right.
And admit and make no mistake, I come, when in my 20s, I was big hard gainer into the, I've always come from more of the intensity effectiveness end.
Mm.
I mean, clearly, and again, this was kind of Chris Beardsley's synthesis and mine as well, that like, okay, maybe if we look at it as, because again, in science, you have to build a model around the bulk of the data. And when you find studies that are contrary to one another, you have to, if you group them, you frequently see patterns showing up, right? As sort of a side example, because I love to hear my own voice, for 50 years, there's been a debate about metabolic adaptation. Does it occur during a diet? About half studies say yes, about half studies say no. And when you read reviews, it's hilarious because depending on the bias of the author, they'll pick whichever ones agree with them. Well, I'm interested in the whole body, right? How do we explain the seeming contradiction? And what happens is that when you collect all of the studies that say it happens and all the studies that don't, the big difference is initial body fat percentage, pretty much. When you're above a certain body fat percentage, I mean, and I'm talking 40 to 50%, I'm talking at the extremes, you don't see much. And I could get into a bunch of physiology with leptin and leptin thresholds, a bunch of stuff nobody cares about. And once you get below a certain point, it starts. Well, boom, there's your answer right there. Right? When you're above a certain body fat, the body, there is no reason for it to metabolically adapt for the most part because you've got so much fat stored, it doesn't care, to put it in a very anthropomorphic sense. Then when you get leaner, it is an indefensible argument because every study ever shows that. So again, we group the volume studies. We go, here's the 3 that show super high volumes are superior sometimes, depending on if you actually adhere to statistics or not, but I don't want to rave about that. Here are the 6 that don't. And you look at the 3 that didn't, and it is what I consider an inefficient method of training. You are spending 3 times as long in the gym, either because you're stopping way short of failure, or you're using such a short wrist. And again, I want to see it. I want to see the workout because I don't believe it for it. I don't even care. Either you're stopping at form failure on back squats. I still don't think anybody's getting back into the bar in 60 seconds. Show me. Video the workout. Prove me wrong. I'll be happy to be proven wrong. I don't believe it. So those are the 3 that say super high volumes. Then you've got the 6 that say moderate is pretty much better. And boom, that's how you explain it. If you're doing, and invariably the ones that say that lower is better used a much higher quality of training. You were closer to failure, these 2 to 3 minute long rest intervals. Another one just came out and it compared 12, 18, and 24 for lower body. And I should know the name of the author, and I don't right now. I know I looked it up. But anyway, they use kind of a weird periodization scheme, but they use longer rest intervals. And they actually found that from a growth standpoint, 12 was as good as anything else. 18 was better for strength, probably from a practice perspective. So there's another one that adds to the body and I like it, not because it agrees with me. It used a much more realistic spread of volumes, right? I read these papers and they always set it by sets per exercise. So it's like, okay, we compared 8, 24, and 48. Right. Okay, look. Right? Brad's was 9, 27, and 45. Right? So even if one, like 27 is, okay, what happens in between those two? That is a staggering, it's triple the range.
Sure.
Stop setting it as sets per exercise. Set it as sets per muscle group. So this one did 12, 18, 24 by manipulating whatever. And basically 12 was just as good as any of the higher. So yeah, okay. So the argument then becomes, well, because there's an individual in my group who takes my comment that this is piss-ass training rather personally. And like, okay, fine. Not everyone is cut out for intensity. It burns some people out, no doubt about it. On certain movements, I certainly wouldn't recommend most go to failure. I've taken full squats to failure. I can guarantee you that the number of people I've ever seen squat to true muscular failure, I can probably count on one hand. I've seen people have stuff go awry, but true muscular failure in the squat means you start to descend, you get stuck halfway up and either need a spot or you got to dump the bar. Have you ever done it on purpose? No. Most people have not. I have repeatedly back when I was younger. That's the other thing the big issue that I bring up a lot. Well, okay, let me get back to your original question. Does it matter? Clearly not in the big picture, right? The growth is about the same whether you train what I consider efficiently
Right.
or what I consider inefficiently. And James Krieger, I guess, did a recent analysis where he basically drew that conclusion. So he said, okay, if you're going heavy, there's probably a per workout limit to the number of productive sets. And again, we can look at this from sort of that effective rep thing. Is again, effective reps. The idea is that it's the repetitions done under full muscular activation, and you get that closer to failure with very heavy weights. The idea would be that once you've stimulated the muscle to a certain point, you can't stimulate more. And there's other systems that work like that. This has actually been shown for bone loading. Once you give it like 20 or so like full stimuli, it becomes resistant to further. You can do 50 or 100. It doesn't do any more. I suspect it will be true for muscle. I want someone to look at it specifically. I want to see the numbers. Find a way to just be like, all right, we did, the only study I've ever seen compared 1 set to 3 sets, and 3 sets generated was a better stimulus. Well, let's take this further. 1 set to failure, 3 sets to failure, 6, 9, 12. Where does the stimulus stop increasing? And James's basic conclusion was 8 was the sweet spot if you're within a rep or 2 of failure. Anything above 10 is excessive, which is interesting because then that contradicts Brad's paper that James was on that he defended for a year and a half because I'm mean. Because you can't have it both ways. You can't say it's 10 sets per workout, but 15 is superior. Sorry, I'm not a mathematician. Somebody check that. But from what I can tell, if 10's the maximum, 15 is above 10, I think. He then concluded that below 6 was ineffective, which is contradicted completely by the Barbalo research, where 5 was just as effective as 10, neither here nor there. But again, these are true limit sets. So basically, he's like, all right, 6, maybe let's call it 8 to 10 sets, heavy sets, twice a week. It's about 16 to 20. It's funny, that's what I wrote, almost 2 years ago? 10 to 20 sets per week. Everybody's come back to that. Here's an interesting piece of trivia. Mike Israetel wrote a paper for, I want to say, the Strength and Conditioning Journal, which I will eventually look at. And as a throwaway sentence, he said, we might realistically set a set count between 10 to 20 sets per week and start at 10 and build to 20 and go back. What happened to 1 billion sets per week, Mike? Why do y'all all agree with me now? Because y'all do. But you don't have the guts to say I was right all along. Anyway. James then concluded, because he's got to make sure and keep this in, that for short periods, higher volumes, 15, 34, whatever, might be useful. But again, that makes no sense. If 8 sets, heavy sets, is the maximum, the only way 15 sets could potentially be useful is if it's inefficient training. But he even said that there doesn't seem to be any benefit, like in terms of the results, that there is no difference in the end result, growth-wise, between 8 heavy sets roughly or the 15, as I like to call them, piss-ass sets. So you can't have it both. You can't. And again, I may be misrepresenting the analysis if I am. I'm sorry about that, because I read too much and I forget it all. But it's one or the other, right? And again, Chris Beardsley, that's the conclusion he sort of drew. It's like, end of the day, they generate the same results, but this explains the aggregate, the high volume stuff. You're just not training efficiently. To get the same number of effective reps, when you're stopping 4 reps short of failure, you got to do 2 to 3 times as much volume. If some people wanted,
just because I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure of any, do we have any high volume studies, or really any studies that have adequate rest periods, let's say 2 to 5 minutes, showing anything above 20 sets is beneficial? Is there anything out there showing that? Nope. Just because I wonder, kind of like with what you said, I've been training for 15 years. I know no research I find is going to do anything for me at this point. It's more just an intellectual endeavor at this point. I find it interesting. And I do coach others. And so for me, if I can get somebody to their goal, let's say in 5 years versus 7 years, that's great. But ultimately, I've talked to a few people about this, that I think if you intelligently bulk up, gain weight, lean bulk, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
for an extended period of time, cut down, do that a few times over the years, and you do that intelligently, you're going to have like 90 to 95% of your size. And there are huge
Yes.
individuals from the low volume camp, huge individuals
Yeah.
from the high volume camp. I'd love to believe, as I think most of us would, that we're going to find something. But some of these studies, it's just, I mean, monthly application of Strength Sport, the monthly review.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I
Yep.
and I like it. I think it's interesting, but so many of the conclusions are it didn't matter that much, or small effect. We'll see what further
Yes.
research shows, and that's nothing to that's not a negative against mass. That they're just reporting on what the studies show.
Sure.
But I think in this space, there's just not that much that's like, wow, this was amazing. This is going to change everything. It's just not as much as we might want to find something like that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's sort of always been a lot of it is, and no mistake, I've contributed to this. We want to be obsessive psychos and try to get optimal results. And at the end of the day, you end up the same spot no matter what path you take, right? Like, and this is so I just as a preview for something that one study I am aware of. Apparently, I believe Renaissance Periodization, which is the company Mike is involved with, is funding a study from Brad's lab to examine, do we need to add weight to the bar to grow?
I saw that. That's going to be
and I like to think he also wrote a paper with Grigic about counting sets, about how do we count sets during studies, which was is funny because he kind of went through and he's like, well, there's really limited research. Well, limited research we have says that you shouldn't count 1-to-1, which was part of my contention all along. However, all the other studies have done it 1-to-1, so we might as well use that anyway, even though we know that it's wrong, which I think is not.
You mean when you say that, just to clarify for people listening, you mean for smaller muscle groups that are.
Sure. So one of the big issues I have with a lot of these studies, right, is they're like, okay, we're going to do high volume of compound exercises. We did chest press and incline press, and we measured the triceps. Well, we did 16 sets of chest. So, but we didn't measure the pecs or the delts. We measured the triceps. Well, 16 sets gave, or whatever it was. Okay, who in their right mind thinks that 16 sets for chest is the equivalent of 16 sets for triceps? No coach in the world. Now, can I say exactly what it is? No. If you read my articles, I assumed, and I've always counted them like this, it's about half. Right? Now, it depends on your individual levers, depends on a whole bunch of different stuff. And if you actually go back and read Eric Helms's analysis of Brad's paper, he says the exact same thing, probably about 0.5-to-1. So if you did 16 heavy sets for chest, I would count that as 8 sets for triceps. And when you reparse all the studies and all the volume studies, all of a sudden the numbers get a whole lot more realistic. Now, what I don't understand is I have seen papers that do ultrasound on the pecs. A study on both women and men. They did the glutes. They did the pec. I think they did the pecs. They did the bis and delts. I don't understand why all these studies are using like compound chest and back and measuring biceps and clearly, methodologically, you can measure these other muscles. That would tell us a hell of a lot more about what it is. If you're doing 16 sets of compound chest, I want to know how your chest responded, right? And when you go back and remath these studies out, and I did this in the series I did called Training Volume and Hypertrophy towards the very end, the numbers come they come way more in line because several of the early studies did use isolation work, like Ostrowski did. One of the other ones did. He used a kind of a weird split routine. The GBT studies had an arm day. And when you sort of start to math them out and you look at these high volume studies, and suddenly when 16 compound chest sets becomes, half that many for the triceps, all of a sudden the volumes come way closer in line per week. And do we need more data on this? Absolutely. But the couple of studies that have been done, one, they looked at recovery and they were like, we did pull downs or bicep curls. Biceps took twice as long to recover from bicep curls. Well, yeah, of course it did.
Right.
And there's another one that looked at growth in pull downs and bicep curls. Biceps grew more from bicep curls, right? You can't count. But anyway, the point of this being that, so Brad did that paper, right? Because my premise my contention for the last decade and a half, based on the data, is that over time, I'm not saying every workout or every week, over time, if you're not adding weight to the bar, you're not growing. And you can prove this to yourself all day, every day. Go into any gym. The biggest naturals are very strong. Now, I'm not saying they're strongest in absolute terms. They're not strong in powerlifter terms. They got much stronger from where they started.
Sure.
Look at it. Watch any trainee, go pick a random guy who's farting around for 20 sets in the gym. Note his poundages. Come back in a year. Are they the same? So is he. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Right?
I've definitely found that as well.
You will not find a big natural who's weak. You will not find a small natural who's strong. But, I mean, again, you get some weird lever issues, but by and large, if you're not getting stronger over time, you're not getting bigger over. Within a moderate rep range, again, people like to make all these just asinine inferences. Well, why isn't the biggest bencher in powerlifting the biggest guy? Well, actually, usually they are, number one. But number two, I'm not talking about one rep max strength. Dante Trudell put it the best.
That came to mind.
Growth is stimulated by increasing your strength in a moderate repetition range. That summarizes 90% of what you need to know. But my point being, so Brad's not going to do this paper, is adding weight to the bar necessary for growth. I can already tell you what it's going to be and what it's going to conclude. It's going to be about 8 weeks long. And I don't know what he's going to compare that to. Probably adding volume. I don't know. It's about 8 weeks long. It's going to be unblinded ultrasound because that's what he always does. And he does the measurements. But he can be biased because he said so. Ha, 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 ha. It will, did I lose you? Oh, it will conclude that, no, you don't have to add weight to the bar. And everyone will go, Lyle's wrong. Well, I didn't say you had to add weight every week. I've never said that. Over 8 weeks, right? When you get advanced, a weight you're using now is going to remain a stimulus for a pretty extended period of time, right? Beginners, what is the old Ripito thing? Beginners add weight every week, intermediates add, or every day, intermediates add weight every 2 or 3 weeks, advanced add weights every month, right? The same weight you're using now will very probably be a stimulus for at least a month if you're pretty advanced, if you're intermediate to advanced. So yeah, over 8 weeks, you may not have to add weight. Again, tell me what happens over a year. You can prove it to yourself. The point of it being is that I like to think that I have so much of an influence that Brad wrote that counting paper and is designing this new paper just to prove me wrong. I genuinely I am that just enough of an egotist to believe that he's doing that because he's mad at me. I hope so. I really do. I don't know. I mean, I may be giving myself too much credit, but
I was definitely influenced by Dante as well early on. And I remember even back probably late high school, early college, and my arms hadn't grown in like a year. And I remember saying, like, I wrote down in like a little log I had, and I was like, well, no surprise, you're not any stronger, so you're not any bigger. And that's definitely, and I've always been, and I think you said the same thing about yourself, I've always been proportionally stronger than I am big. I could usually outlift people who looked about my size, but still, relative to me, I had to get stronger for sure to get bigger. That's kind of, I think, fairly universal. I think, yes, you can do these short-term things, which is, I guess I'll touch back in with that study. But yeah, every time I would do an arm specialization phase, I'd crank up the arm volume like crazy. I'd gain a 1/4 inch on my arm. But did that have any net result on my arms over my 15 years of lifting? I really doubt it. And I saw that paper that they're planning on doing. I saw the title of it. I would guess in part they're trying to be a little inflammatory with it. Obviously, if you took somebody who has like a 135 for 5 max on a bench, let's say, they don't need to add weight, and they could get into 10 reps and they will see growth, however long that takes. I think, of course, though, any of them would agree over time, you obviously need to add weight because nobody's going to get to their maximum size benching 135 pounds for 80 reps.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure they actually do agree with that. Because certainly that, I mean, maybe they are, and I'm not reading it. But hang on, so this is the paper that I was thinking about. Just came out. It's AUBA et al. D'Souza was on it. Progressive resistance training volume effects on muscle thickness, mass, and strength adaptations in resistance trained individuals. Journal of Strength Conditioning Research, February 13th, 2020. So this like literally just came out. And I'm trying to pull up the full paper, but 8-week resistance training program consisting of 2 weekly sessions. Blah, blah, blah. They did either 12 sets, 18 sets, or 24 sets a week. And this is for the lower body only. So fairly reasonable spread as far as the volume went, measuring in all the standard stuff. And I'm pretty sure it was, hang on, I just had it because I looked it up. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
Because Sci-Hub is not working for me. So, among other things, the same 2 researchers performed all of the pre-training and post-training measurements and were blinded to the experimental groups. It's amazing. It can be done. The workout, they used a heavy light. Day 1, 6 to 8 rep max. Day 2, 12 to 15 rep max with 2 to 3 minute rest intervals. So it was quality work. They said that their next study, which as far as I'm aware is almost complete, is testing directly what happens if you increase volume from... Oh, this was another thing, and this is an issue that is kind of complex but needs to be addressed. Frequently in these studies, they're starting to mention, okay, this was the habitual training volume of where the person is coming from, right? Because there's always the question, right? If you've been on low volume and suddenly you put in the high volume group, is it the volume per se or is it the change? Right. This is a big area of complication because you can't ever be quite sure. Or if you were doing a bunch of sets and you could put in lower volume, maybe you grew because you were overtrained. Right. Like there's all these. Well, one thing this particular paper specifically stated that it did was once they got the previous training volumes, they distributed them evenly into each group to try to eliminate that as a variable. Does it eliminate it completely? Absolutely not. However, they at least were trying. And apparently, Lucas Defer, who's in my group, said that, yeah, their next study is going to see what happens when you change volume from habitual volume. And this will be a really interesting data set. Because, right, what have people talked about for years and years and years is that, what is the trite statement? The best training program is the one you're not on, which is just it's so dumb. But I and it's like, shock the system and alternate between volume and intensity and things of that nature. And yeah, that's fine. That's legitimate. And, and to go back to your earlier question, the lighter training with more sets. Well, some people's joints get beaten up with constant heavy training. Make no mistake, right? Not everyone is built for it mentally, psychologically, or otherwise. Like, I think it can be taught, but not everybody has it in them to build up that kind of intensity. For them, yeah, you can make up for it with volume to a degree. It still needs to be challenging, right? And that's still the thing. I watch people in my gym piss around for 2 hours day in, day out, right? They're never working hard at all, and like, yeah, fine. If you're doing, 15 sets and you're within 4, like whatever, that's fine. So that's the most recent study. And again, they did quality work. They blinded the research. Quality training. They did a heavy light, very typical. They did, they compared a reasonable spread of volumes. They gave sufficient rest intervals to go heavy. And somehow under those conditions, higher volumes weren't superior. And it's funny. And I even made one of my typical snarky comments that I think, I think if you put the data side by side on top of the other issues, you got the 3 volume studies that is very low quality training. You've got all the lower volume studies, which are very high quality training. And suddenly you see the distinction, the differences break out. But I bet if you were to put the studies that use long rest intervals, but blinded the researchers to the outcomes, I bet suddenly the ones that are blinded would start to find different results than the ones that weren't blinded. Because when you don't blind research, it increases the risk of bias. And I'm saying that blinding eliminates it, but somehow when you're the head researcher designing the study and maybe have a preconceived belief about what the results are going to be, and you do the measurements unblinded, maybe, just maybe, you see some, especially because ultrasound, there's a subjective element, right? It's not like DEXA, it's not like MRI. People knew what ultrasound really looks like. Basically, it's one of those like vague X-ray pictures, and you kind of go, boom, that's the difference in size. Yeah, okay. But yeah, suddenly it's like when the lab's blind and gives sufficient rest intervals, somehow they seem to be getting systematically different results than the studies that are unblinded. Because from memory, that Brigado study, the 8x10 RM on 60 seconds, they forgot the blinds too. It's interesting. And it's weird because it's so easy to do. It's free. I don't know, like it should just be a fundamental aspect of research and of science, and yet somehow. Then again, years ago, my mentor, a materials engineer, he studied rocks. Rocks are easy to study, comparatively speaking. Sound like the most god-awful boring thing I've ever heard. He told me, he's like, exercise science is a joke. Got tiny samples, short periods, uncontrollable humans, and a tenfold biological response. And 20 years later, I'm like, he might have had a point. I mean, exercise science is still better than social psychology, but which you want to talk when you start getting further and further down, like it's in the middle, but there are a lot of issues because and sort of as just a quick random tangent, I expect beyond everything else, a lot of the hypertrophy research is truly about to get thrown into disarray by a observation that several recent papers have made, none of which I remember the names of. What they're finding, because like, what are we doing? We are comparing one individual to another in these different volumes. And if you look at the variance in response, it's enormous. And this is always part of the problem, because what are we generally reporting in research? The average result, right? Even in Brad's paper, some of the higher volume groups got less growth than the lower volume groups, and vice versa. If you actually look at the paper Mike Israetel was involved in, and the reason I keep describing it like that is I'm afraid I'm going to mispronounce Cody. For a while, I wrote it as Juan, Huan, and I think it's actually Han, Haun, and I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm just going to keep saying it's the paper Mike is involved with, is because they did that sub-analysis, right? The sarcoplasmic hypertrophy thing, and they took all the subjects, 30 or so. Half the people lost size. If you actually look at the graph, because what they did for that sub-analysis said, all right, we're going to take the group of people who grew above a certain point. But if you look at the graph, the line, there's a few people that got small, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. When you have data like that, all it takes is one big outlier to pull the numbers up.
Yeah.
Suddenly, but anyway, so we're comparing individuals with hugely individual variance. Well, a couple studies have compared individuals to themselves. So we'll do like 3 sets for one arm and 6 for the other, right? So they're their own control. And what they're finding is that, yes, there are often differences in volume response. However, individuals who get the best response to high volumes also get the best response to low volumes. And that the variance within any given individual is much, much, much smaller than the variance between two individuals. Basically, if you're going to grow, you're going to grow. And if you're not going to grow, you should take up a different sport, right? And that's just, we've known this. And so we've got all these research studies comparing individuals to one another. And a lot of the results may turn out to not really be what the conclusions may not be what we want them to be, because what we really need to find out is, does a given individual respond better or worse to one or the other?
Right.
And again, basically, and even there's work showing who is a hyper responder and who is not. Better mitochondrial function predicts better growth response, probably because you have just better energetic status. One paper came out last year that the people who were able to synthesize more ribosomes basically take synthesized proteins, they pull in amino acids and all that stuff everybody forgot from 8th grade biology. The people who had the greatest increase in ribosomes from training grew the best. Well, it's genetic.
Yeah.
Until I come up with a ribosomal biogenesis training program, coming soon from McDonald Labs, LLC, whatever. Right? Basically, if you're genetically blessed, you're genetically blessed, and if you're not, too bad. And so I think that's going to be a big change going forwards.
Yeah, I did have Cody on twice actually, and Michael
That's
Roberts, and they were pretty upfront about that, about saying that there was a big variation in the results among individuals, that the variation was much bigger as far as like looking at individuals versus like within the person. Basically, like you said, if
Yeah.
you're gonna grow, you're gonna grow, and if you don't have the genetics for it, it's just kind of a bitch. But they were upfront about it.
It was like a tenfold difference. Like it wasn't small. Like the difference between within a given individual and between individuals, it's like tenfold. So it's really we're not really. It's like not a joke in terms of like And again, there's this whole thing about who's a responder, and there's a lot of early work on mostly on aerobic stuff that, good God, that like in response to aerobic training, some people increase their VO2 max by roughly 0%, and others increase their VO2 max by roughly 40%.
Yeah.
Like, then they were like, there are non-responders, and someone's like, oh, the non-responders just need more volume.
Right.
And of course, that's now been sort of inferred to, if you're a hard gainer, you should do more volume rather than less, which I don't think it's been studied on resistance training yet, but it's worth looking at, certainly. Yeah. But again, how do we know a priori, before the study, who is and who isn't a hyper responder?
I think we did look at that a little bit. I don't remember. It's been a little while since I talked to Cody, but I feel like they did find that the people who didn't respond in the lowest volume group, when they did the higher volume, they had some response. Again, it was less, but it was some response. I believe they did look at that.
So so I think that's really it's entirely possible that we're actually asking the wrong question, right? Yeah. Rather than asking the question of what is the optimal volume in absolute terms, but then again, you do like when you start to look at kind of these studies that used quality work, it seems to me like a lot of this kind of falls out in the wash. Like if you look at the Barbalaho studies that went super heavy to failure, like pretty much it was everybody in the low volume group grew better than everybody, and like there wasn't that kind of extreme overlap because and who knows, maybe it's neurological efficiency, maybe it's this is also an issue with going to failure. Most people don't stop lifting when they hit muscular failure. They stop when it gets hard. Mm-hmm. And there's an enormous difference in those two, because for a while I got up my butt last year. And because honestly, and this will sound, you want to talk about, a personal attack, but whatever. I'm not pretending to be a scientist. I don't give a damn. If you want to understand why certain individuals in this evidence-based industry promote such high volumes, go watch the videos of them training, and you'll understand exactly why they need these kind of volumes. They only need these kind of volumes because when you watch their work, like there's one of a couple individuals doing their sets and then trying to determine, asking each other, so how many reps in reserve do you think that was? These people are publishing articles on a topic and they don't even know the answer. Okay. And so anyway, I shot a bunch of videos because I spent all those years in a hard gainer camp.
Yeah.
2 sets, like I'll kill anybody in 2 set squats. You won't get off the floor for 10 minutes. I have done 2 all-out sets of 15. To failure with a 5-minute rest interval with the same weight on the bar. You won't get off the floor. You sure as shit won't get off the floor in 90 seconds, right?
I'm surprised you even got the same. You got 15 and then 15 again.
That's with a 5-minute rest. And I'm built more for endurance. So I was a better endurance athlete than I ever was a lifter. But I did the John Christie 2 all-out sets of 5 on 5 minutes. Like I've done the worst set I ever did. I just like to talk about this because I wouldn't recommend it. My mentor, who was an evil, evil man. I only did this once because I actually met him in person once. So the 20 rep squat, right? You take presumably your 10 rep max, and you rest pause it to 20 reps. So this was his version of it. First, you did your set of 20 under his watchful eye. And you get to 10, however you take, by the end of it, you're just breathing like a freight train. Then he assesses penalty repetitions. Any rep that he was not happy with, which could be too fast, not deep enough, not under control, you had to do again. Could be 0. I guess presumably it could be all of them. Then You try to get either 5 more repetitions or get stuck in the bottom. That's failure in the squat. Now, would I recommend most people do it? No, because they'll get hurt. People will miss singles. I'm talking about, and if you go online, go look at the video of Jesse Marund, who unfortunately has passed away, squatting something stupid, 405 by 40 or something just ungodly. And he racks the bar and right? What I think is happening, a lot of people, because I put up these videos, right? I'm like, look, this is what failure looks like. We're pushing until you get stuck in the middle, push as hard as you can, and sometimes you grind it out, right? If the bar speed is not moving extremely slowly at the end, you're not anywhere close to failure. You think you are, but you're just stopping because it's hard. Until you've done that, you don't have the first damn clue how many reps from failure you are. Period. Right. And if you go watch videos, a lot of the people espousing higher volumes, it's pretty obvious why, because they're training. And then you look at like the crap. And what was it? Take the first set to full on concentric failure, except squats and like RDL. Certain movements are not built for it. Rest, do 2 or 3 more repetitions, rest 2 or 3 more reps, right? Typical rest pause. And again, if you look at it in that effective rep model, you get that first set to failure, which is however many, 4 or 5 effective reps. By not getting full recovery and continuing that long set, get 2 or 3 more, do that twice, boom, there's your 25 effective reps per set, which might be sort of a fun. And if you start mathing it all out, that's about where all this stuff comes out. Now, is dog crap for everybody? No. Burns a lot of people out? Absolutely. Blade, Fagerly, thank you. He's got his bio reps, very similar concept. You do your muscular activation set, and then you rest pause your way to however many repetitions, right? We start to see these commonalities. So yeah, there's basically multiple paths to the goal. You can do, 6 to 8 sets that are just short of failure. You can do 5 to true limits, 2 or 3 times twice a week or whatever it is. You can do, 15 sets fooling around. You can do 32 sets a week that are all warm-ups, truly fooling around. Or you could do rest pause somewhere in the middle. Yes, it does get it, but I'm not generally seeing the high volume people qualifying it. They're saying high volume is superior in absolute terms. And then James comes out a year and a half later and says, there's actually no real difference in the results if you go 8 sets right. And then he called the concilians. And what that meant was everybody agrees with what I said originally. And Eric at mass. Mike Israetel has revised his training volume. James has changed his tune. Concilians here means they all agree with me now, but none of them will come out and say I was right all along.
Well,
but that's a whole separate.
That's a good mic drop to end on. I feel like whenever we talk, my mind, I think of so many other things we could talk about. I'm sure we could go for a very long time, and I'm sure this will not be the last time that I have you on.
Absolutely.
But where can people find more of your stuff? If you want to talk about
as always, my website, bodyrecomposition.com, where I've been actually doing a lot more videos lately because I know people don't want to read endless, tedious stuff. Actually, I do both. I'll shoot the video and then I'll write the article after the fact, which is usually close. My Facebook, and then my store is store.bodyrecomposition.com. Facebook group is called Body Recomposition. You can probably see a theme going. That's where I am most of the time. My Instagram is mainly dad jokes. Predominantly every once in a while I'll put something up serious, but it's mainly being goofy. For example, today's status update, because I sang karaoke last night, which is my voice is destroyed, is apparently I was put on this world to sing Under the Sea from The Little Mermaid. I don't know what it is, but for some reason that is the song I am like the best at. I don't know. So that was my Instagram update today, just to give you an idea. Everybody expects me to put all kinds of fitness stuff, and it's usually just me telling stupid jokes.
Were you actually at McDonald on your Instagram?
No, I didn't. I'll video.
We're gonna need that, Lyle.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I'll get it on video at some point. But and the reason I did it about 3 weeks ago, karaoke went Disney, and the only songs in the karaoke catalog that I knew were the DuckTales theme, which I kind of knew. And then, the last Disney movie I saw was Little Mermaid, 1992, when I was in college. That's oh my God, that's almost 20 years old.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can fake my way through this. And I just destroyed it. Anyway, so that's at McDonald Lyle is my Instagram. My Facebook group is really where I'm most active. And as I like to always point out, I have a staggering number of really, 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 really smart people in my group. I've got 4 top-notch physios, including one, I believe he's a surgeon of some sort, experts on eating disorders, OBGYN for the stuff I can't cover. You name it, there's somebody in my group that probably has expertise in it. And even the members, any question that gets asked, if I don't know what it is, somebody will be, those 6 people will be like, yeah, I've dealt with this.
Yeah.
And I have one person I actually am trying to give more exposure because I think it's really important what he's doing. There's a guy in my group named Trevor Bunch, and he runs a page called The Fit Bunch. And he is a double lower body amputee. And I forget if he's above the knee or below the knee. And his website is dedicated. He basically got into strength and conditioning. That wasn't his original career. And he does a lot of it's a lot of information on adapted exercise and things that I believe it's predominantly lower body amputee. I don't swear me to that. The things they need to do to stay healthy and be functional. Now, even though it's not something I'll probably ever use professionally, it gives me a different way to think about things. Seeing, and there are people in my group also that have various physical amputations. There's one guy who's like a record-holding deadlifter, below the elbow amputation. He uses a strap that's attached to the bar. I'm like, how do you pull 600 pounds with this thing strapped to your arm? And he said, in excruciating pain. And I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Trevor Bunch is this great page. Even if you're never going to use it, even if you're never going to work with adapted exercise, it will give you a different way to think about things, just a different perspective. So I really try to kind of get his name out there, and it's called The Fit Bunch. So yeah, my Facebook group, like I said, I'm there all the time. And that's where to find me.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much, Lyle. And everybody listening, just as a reminder, we do have that Cotton Branch Farm Sanctuary link down below if you want to donate as well. So thanks to everybody for listening.
Yeah, I do just randomly on that note. I love it when people do that stuff. Set up the farms to be just like, bring your animals. They can live here. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, guys.